Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookishrealm and I'm back with another video. So today I am here to talk a little bit about look at the kicks box in the back, y'all. Welcome to Parenting 101. Okay, just welcome to Parenting 101. Anyway, I am here to talk a little bit about some of the 2022 new releases that I think you should check out, and these are for books that came out in quarter 1. So I am simply talking about books that came out in March, February, January. I don't know why I want to do that backwards. What I mean to say is January, February, March. Those are the 3 months that I'm looking at. I think I have about 10 titles, so we're gonna go ahead and jump into this video. It's not too long. Okay, so the first title that I have on this list is Sundial. This is by Catriona Ward. I believe that's how you say her name. This is a random pickup that I decided to go with because the cover, really, honestly, I was like, oh, I want to read this one because of the cover. So I checked it out at Libby from my library, and it is about a woman who has 2 daughters, and they are an interesting family is the best way for me to put it. I think that there are some weird things that she feels like are going on with her daughter, that she's exhibiting this very strange behavior, and she's nervous about what that could possibly mean for the rest of the family. So she decides to take her on this trip to a place where she used to go that will explain some of her behavior, I think. But then there's also some sections that are from the daughter's perspective, who thinks that her mother is acting really weird, and she's scared for her life that her mother is taking her on this trip. Y'all, this book was extremely strange. I literally cannot say anything about it because the joy of reading this book, I think, is simply not knowing what to expect, not even knowing what genre it is, just reading it and experiencing the story for what it is, which is what I did, and I ended up enjoying it, although it seems to be kind of like a hit or a miss. Some people really enjoyed, others are kind of like, not what I was looking for. But for me, I did enjoy it, and I'm very interested in checking out the rest of Ward's works. So if you have not read Sundial, definitely give it a try. The next one that I want to talk about is a picture book, and it is Powwow Day. This is one that I believe I read as an e-arc from Edelweiss, and it's just one that I was looking for. Publishing, especially when I look at like the children's reports that come from Lee and Low, really struggles with doing any type of publications that focus on the Native American or Indigenous experience. I try to get access to as many of those children's works as possible, so this is one of those that came out this year in quarter 1. Powwow Day is about a young girl by the name of River who has suffered from an illness. We don't know what that specific illness is. All we know is that she wants to dance at Powwow Day, but due to her recovering from this illness, she isn't able to dance. And by following her throughout the day, she teaches readers so much about what it means to be at a powwow. The artwork was completely gorgeous. Illustrations were great. I think I learned so much about powwows. There's also a kind of like terminology glossary in the back that teaches you even more about powwows if you're interested. The next one that I have is another picture book, and it is called Dear Reader by Tiffany Rose. This is a book that centers a little black girl who loves reading. She loves going to the library, but unfortunately every time she goes to the library, what she finds is that all of the books with characters that look like her center the most painful parts of history. So she is struggling to find books that just have black people doing just ordinary things, which is very interesting because this is a conversation that is currently happening inside and outside of publishing, where there are black readers who are now telling publishers that they need to find this balance between showcasing black trauma and showcasing black joy. I myself have been very, very guilty of leaning towards reading a lot of books that rely heavily on showing black trauma. So it is nice to see this in picture book format to remind everyone, including myself, that there is a balance that is needed. Not saying that those parts of history should not be told or that those experiences shouldn't be shared, but there needs to be some sort of balance within publishing, and that trauma is not everything that comes from the Black community. The next one that I have is a middle grade book, and it is A Comb of Wishes. This is one that I was really looking forward to last year, and I was able to listen to this one on audio, and I really enjoyed it. It is a book that focuses on Caribbean folklore, so if you're interested in that, I definitely would recommend checking out this book. It is about a young girl by the name of Keela who is on the island with her dad. So one day while Keela is on the beach, she finds this comb that belongs to a mermaid, and the mermaid promised to grant her one wish, and she is supposed to return the comb in one piece, but of course not returning the comb has some pretty interesting disasters attached to it. I love the mix of having like a Black mermaid and the focus of this narrative. This is also a book that focuses on the tradition of oral storytelling, which is really neat. If you like understanding more about oral storytelling and the art that goes into it, I would definitely recommend checking this one out. It also heavily navigates what it means to process grief, or to grieve the loss of a close relative or friend, and specifically for Keela, that is, you know, figuring out how to grieve the loss of her mother. And I think that the author did an excellent job kind of looking at all of those different components and giving us this narrative of this little girl. It was an excellent book. I highly recommend it. It's one that I definitely see myself picking up again in the future, and just, it was good. This is another good middle grade book. The next one that I have is Operation Sisterhood. This is another middle grade book that I ended up really enjoying. It is about a girl named Bo who lives with her mother, and her mother is dating this guy, and she doesn't really have any issues with her mom dating until they decide that they're all going to move in together. So Bo essentially goes from being like the only child living with her mother to living with 3 other adults and I believe 3 other girls. So it is a huge kind of like blended family where we have like 2 sets, so 2 separate families living together as a unit. I think there were so many different cool aspects of this one. There were like little tidbits about the history of Harlem, because they end up moving to Harlem and the girls are being homeschooled, so they have to do like different projects about the history of Harlem, so we learn through their eyes. I think watching the 4 girls grow together as sisters, even though like they're not biologically related, they grow together, and I thought that that was such a great asset to the book. I think one of the main criticisms that I did have about this when I was reading it is that there is a lot that goes on in this book at one time, so just keep that in mind while reading it. But I think that at its core, it is a great book about, you know, just building that sisterhood with people, great history of Harlem, and, you know, I think what it's like to have to transition from being an only child to then having, you know, another parent step in and another sibling. I think that the author did a really great job handling all of that. The next one that I wanted to highlight is a YA contemporary book, and it is The Chandler Legacies. This is one that I had my eyes into, but I had my eyes on this one because of the fact that it is a boarding school type of situation where we have a few characters that we're following from alternate perspectives who are attending this elite boarding school, and each one of them kind of has their issues. I gravitated towards this one heavily because it is based on the author's own personal experience being Iranian and having to go to a boarding school where there's a lot of white privileged boys, and also, you know, having to be comfortable or trying to be comfortable in his sexuality, knowing that it's not going to be something that's going to be necessarily accepted while at this boarding school. So that's why I gravitated towards this one, and you can definitely tell that the author put a lot of his own personal experience and emotions into the pages of this book. It was really well done. I think that the only criticism that I had when I read this one is that it was on, like a lot of people have said, that it is short for the things that it does try to tackle, and it does tackle some very heavy things, and it does so in a good way. But I think that I would have liked an extended like version or an extended explanation of how these things were going to wrap up, because they were such heavy topics. But I think if you're into conversations or perspectives about boarding schools, especially elite boarding schools, and what it is like being a marginalized voice at a boarding school, this definitely is one that you would want to pick up. Another one that looks at the whole concept of boarding schools is Omar Rising, which this is kind of a companion to Amal Unbound, which I read in 2020. So when I saw that Omar Rising was coming out, I was like, ooh, this has got to be, just from the cover alone, I was like, this has got to be a companion to Amal Unbound, because they're pretty much kind of like designed the same way. And I was right. You don't have to read Amal Unbound to enjoy this one, but Amal does make an appearance in this book, and you know Omar from reading Amal Unbound, so they are connected in that way. So Omar basically is going to a boarding school that he has applied to get into, and his family is extremely proud of him, and he's excited to go. He's making a name for his town and everything. So he goes, and he realizes that there's a lot of classism that is going on at that school. So there are a lot of privileged and wealthy individuals that are attending, and he is not one of them. He is a scholarship student, and the school is designed to weed the scholarship students out. So he pushes back against that and fights against it, because he feels like he can't fulfill the requirements of being a scholarship student. Like, they have to do like volunteer hours and all this stuff, and also stay on top of their studies, and they're treated unfairly by their teachers as well. So they have a lot of things working against them, but it's him pushing back against that system, saying that I deserve to be here just as much as anybody else. So I enjoyed this one as well, and I definitely recommend checking that one out. The next one I have is The Turning Point, which I solely checked this one out because I was like, oh, there's a ballerina on the cover, like a dancer, and this one takes place in the 80s, and it specifically connects back to Prince. So we have our main character, she dances, her dad is her dance teacher, which is a very interesting kind of like thing that is going on there, with her dad being her dance teacher, and they are getting the opportunity to possibly dance for Prince. So if you are into like the history of like music in Minneapolis and the dance scene and everything like that, this is going to be one that you're really going to enjoy. So our main character is trying to really honestly figure out her family life. Her parents are divorced. Her dad is an alcoholic, and he's also her dance teacher, and she has a sister that is disabled because of an accident that she feels responsible for, which is such a hard-hitting aspect of this book. And then we have her just trying to be a teenager in the 80s, and that comes with a lot of different things. She ends up meeting a love interest slash friend slash so many different things that is bisexual. So it does delve a little bit into what the queer scene was like in Minneapolis in the 80s, and this is right at the cusp of the AIDS epidemic as well, so we get a little bit of that. I think that if you just like the 80s in general, this is one that you're going to enjoy. I like the 80s. I'm not an 80s baby, but I like anything like about the 80s, like historically, like pop culture, the music, like everything about the 80s, which is a really good decade, but also a very tough decade for a lot of various reasons. And so I really clung to this book, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like this necessarily done with YA in terms of the time in history that it's covering. So I thought it was really, really unique and very, very well done, and it was exciting. I enjoyed it. I really did end up enjoying that one. The next one that I have is No Filter and Other Lies, and this is one that I decided to pick up because I picked up the author's debut book last year and really, really enjoyed it. So I was like, oh, I'm going to pick this one up and see what this one's all about. This is a good taste at what happens when social media goes completely wrong. It is about a young girl who is fat, she's Latinx, and she is bisexual, and she is obsessed with social media. She's obsessed with social media. She likes taking pictures. She has an Instagram page, but her Instagram is just not doing as well as she's hoping it to do. So she starts taking the pictures of a person that she knows, and she catfishes the world by using pictures of this person and posing as this person. And there are some dire consequences for her doing that. Two of the major things that I appreciated about this book is that, one, outside of those two things, the author is a great writer. She's a great storyteller. This is her second book, and I've enjoyed it, and so that speaks highly. Like, I enjoyed your first book, your second book. Anything that she puts out, I'm pretty much at this point think I'm really, really going to enjoy. But what I liked is that she delved into the conversation about what makes someone successful on social media, and a lot of times people don't want to acknowledge that having a certain body type, being a certain complexion, having a certain hair type, having certain features, that conventional beauty does help people become successful on social media. And it is something that needs to be acknowledged and recognized, and it is the truth. I think there also is, like, you know, hitting that stroke of luck because you're working against the algorithm, but it really, really did mirror a lot of conversations that we've had about being in the booktube community and being, you know, BIPOC or being plus size or not being conventionally beautiful, and sitting in front of a camera and going up against people who are, you know, white than conventionally beautiful. Like, it does make a heck of a difference, and the author does delve into that. Another thing that I really, really appreciated that she did in the context of this book is that our main character does not get off easy. Okay, this is not a book that wraps up in a cute little bow and everything's all right and everything is perfect and she gets exactly what she wants. No, she has to pay for what she did, because she lies so much, she hurts a lot of people, and the author makes sure that those repercussions are in place and in line. And it ends on a very, like, I think a very even note, but not like, oh, we're walking off into the sunset and everything's perfect, which I appreciate it because it's reality, and I think that it needs to be shown in a realistic. And the last one that I have on my list is Mr. Librarian. This is one by B. Love. I was looking forward to this one when she announced that it was coming out this year because of the fact that it is a Black love romance that specifically looks at a librarian, and not a librarian in a conventional way, but I thought that it was well written, it was steamy, it was fun. I love that we had a Black man that was running his own library and a Black woman who was into book restoration, and how the two of them end up meeting, and this kind of like underworld of librarianship that he's involved in. And I don't even want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, and it's not a long book at all. It's probably, like, I would say anywhere in between like 150 to maybe 200 pages, if that, and so I don't want to spoil the contents of it. But if you're into romance, if you're into librarian-based romances, my little librarian heart was just so excited that this was a thing that existed. If that is something that you're interested in, I definitely would recommend checking this one out as well. All right, y'all, so those are the books, the 2022 new releases from quarter one that I think you should read. Let me know in the comments below if there are any other 2022 quarter one new releases, so books that have come out in January, February, March, that you think that I should check out or that you think other viewers should check out. Leave them down in the comment box below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and I will be back with another video soon.